So maybe we can slowly start. Okay, so welcome everybody to our April community call. It's really my pleasure to be here today with you, because it's also one of the first community calls that we organized in a bit different way than we are used to up until now. So we are trying to go on more, I'll say, organized way how to develop the community calls with the registration at Zoom. The community calls are still open to everybody, but it's more of also a bit of protecting the personal data, because when you have Google Drive documents, everything is open to everybody. So maybe a bit more of a I'll say more organized way could be beneficial for many of us. So for the ones that registered, thank you very much for taking this first step with us. I think it's really important for the organization to grow. And it's also one of the, we'll say, new ways how to develop community further. So Brigitte Vézina, who will be the first presenter, is from the Creative Commons, and we are trying to build common pathways also with many, networks. And Creative Commons is also one of the organizations that we are trying to develop a collaboration. I'm now at the IIPC in Brussels, where we also develop some new collaborations, and also with the IIIF. So this is I'll say kind of a future that we are trying to envision for everybody to collaborate in a common digital technological space. So I'm very pleased to give the floor now to Brigitte, who is the Director of Policy and Open Culture at Creative Commons, and she'll be presenting their CC signals and their Open Heritage Statement. If you saw it on our webpage, there is a short description, but also some connections to their work. But of course, I'll leave the floor to Brigitte, and I think it's going to be a very nice presentation. So please, Brigitte, thank you.
Well, thank you very much for these kind words. It's really a pleasure for me to be here and be part of this community for a bit, for at least an hour today. I'm here to talk mostly about the Open Heritage Statement and Creative Commons work in enabling more equitable access to heritage. But since this is a group formed around AI, I wanted to end with a discussion on what might that look like in the context of equitable access to heritage. So I'm hoping that we can save some time for more of a discussion after I'm done with this presentation. So I'll jump right in, because I don't have that much time and I have so many things to tell you. But first, I'll give you the key takeaways, so that if you get distracted or anything happens during the call, this is the one thing that you need to remember. First is that access to heritage is really vital also in the digital environment, and it can have far-reaching positive impact. And I think this is quite obvious to this audience, but we know in the grand scheme of things, it's often forgotten, and access to heritage is often not taken care of as much as we would hope to. And we'll go into a few examples of what I mean by that positive impact. The flip side of that is that access to heritage is under threat in the digital environment, and I'll also go through some of the existing barriers that prevent people from equitably accessing their heritage and therefore participating in the cultural life of the community. And hoping to end on a more positive note with the statement that something can be done to remove these barriers, and it actually already is being done, and it's called Open Heritage, and this is going to be the crux of my presentation today. But first, a few words about Creative Commons, the organization. I'm sure many of you are familiar with us. We are celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, so we've been around a quarter of a century. We started shortly after the internet got big and really enable all sorts of sharing through these new technologies. but where copyright was erecting unfair barriers to people who really wanted to share. So Creative Commons invented these copyright licenses, open licenses that enable rights holders, so copyright creators, to share their their creations on terms more permissible than the default copyright. And over time, Creative Commons licenses were used by artists and creators, but also academics. The whole scholarly publication is now open access thanks to Creative Commons licenses. And in parallel to all that, the cultural heritage institutions, in which many of you, I'm sure, work or are closely tied to, libraries, archives, museums, also started using Creative Commons licenses and public domain tools to share the objects, the digital objects in their collections. This is just a quick overview of the existing licenses and public domain tools. I won't go into details, but if you have any questions at the end, we can go into this. But I wanted to emphasize on the public domain because that is also the scope of the Open Heritage Statement, which I'm about to present to you. So we're only dealing with the creative works and cultural materials that are not or no longer protected by copyright law. And according to the law, these works can be accessed and reused and shared by anyone without having to ask for copyright permission. And here you can see the two Creative Commons tools that we have to really communicate those freedoms, those permissions that are associated with the public domain. There's a public domain mark on the left, which is a label and is used to identify works that are already in the public domain worldwide. And on the right-hand side, that's a CC0. It's a public domain dedication tool. It's something that is used for works that are in copyright, but where a decision has been made to release them and dedicate them to the public domain. And therefore, the result is the same with both those tools, is that all the freedoms associated with being free of copyright can be enjoyed on these materials. Another definition, I guess this is still part of scene setting for us here. Open heritage, we refer to this as heritage and the associated metadata that is made as broadly accessible as possible for sharing and reuse. And here it's important, including commercial use and modifications by anyone for any purpose at no cost to the user and free from unfair, unnecessary restrictions, especially copyright restrictions. And this is a nice example that I like to share about some of the unexpected benefits of sharing collections openly. So this is an example from the UK Natural History Museum, which shared its collections of butterfly specimens. So 150,000, I think, specimens were digitized, and the data itself was also released using a CC0 public domain dedication tool. And thanks to that free availability, scientists were able to analyze the data using computer vision, and we're able to see the effects of climate change on insects. And what they were able to discover was that hotter years produce bigger insects. And this is a really exciting development for us trying to understand this huge challenge for our planet. But for the nerds among us, knowing that this was made possible by CC0 enabling free access because the images and the data was immediately in the public domain is also a really exciting outcome. Here are some other examples from the National Library of Wales. So you can see the library can put all sorts of artifacts and documents, digitize them, and all of these are made available on Wikipedia. So it's also a great way to make sure that the works can live outside the digital collections of institutions and into this really widely accessible platform that is Wikipedia to increase visibility, awareness, and really make the collections come alive in all sorts of new contexts. Other examples include the one on top. You can see Open Heritage written using different typographies. This is from a tool from the National Library of Poland, which is really fun. It's called Polona Typo. You can just write any text that you want, and it will generate the same text using characters taken from digitized works from their collections. On the left-hand side, you see the girl with the pearl earring who is in the Mauritshuis in The Hague, the city where I live, and which has been given a fashion makeover that was part of the Europeana Give It Up contest. So it's a really nice way to see how we can use something that's in the public domain and give it a fresh look, more, I guess, relevant contemporary meaning. And then on the right-hand side, you see the sculpture. This is an antique sculpture. It's a 3D printed version, and that was made available by the Statens Museum for Kunst in Denmark, which digitized and scanned all of their sculptures and made them available in the public domain for anyone to be able to reuse them and decorate their living room or whatever they want to do with those. This is an example from the National Library of Finland. They have a wonderful collection of ancient maps that was recognized as memory, UNESCO Memory of the World. And I'll guess what I also want to say by showing this map is that there is so much more information in cultural heritage that most people think about. So it's nice to see an old painting, an old map, but the scientific information it contains, like for example, the shorelines and water was managed and all the knowledge that people have built into all these cultural artifacts can be invaluable for us to understand the world. I spoke about shorelines. I don't mean to imply that these shorelines are accurate, but you get what I mean. You know, sometimes we can actually be able to see how rising sea levels have had an impact on our environment, and ancient maps are a great source of information to kind of understand what happened and what's likely to happen in the future. So some of you are representing these institutions in this call. So these are examples of institutions, very famous ones that have adopted open heritage, so that have made their collections openly accessible. And in Europe, in the EU, we're lucky enough to have an article that codifies everything that I've just told you, so that in the EU directive on copyright in the digital single market that was adopted in 2019, there's an article that says something like, faithful reproductions of public domain artworks do not attract new copyright. So taking the example of the Vermeer painting, if you scan it, that does not create a new copyright in the digital copy. And that provision in the law was really necessary because what we saw as a practice was that a lot of institutions were digitizing public domain works and then claiming copyright over the digital copy. And thanks to this clarification in the copyright law in EU countries, we now know that there is no new copyright that arises. So in the public domain in analog form will mean in the public domain in digital form. So I could end my presentation here because, you know, public domain, free access, anyone can do whatever they want with it. Of course not. That's not reality. We see that the institutions that actually share collections are not located all over the world. There's a great concentration in Europe and North America, but that's still a very small portion of all institutions. Anywhere else we don't know, or they probably are not sharing this openly, which means that overall we estimate that only 1% of institutions are actually sharing their collections openly. So public domain really being free to access. So what we're seeing in practice is that even though heritage might be in the public domain, there are still many barriers to access that continue to exist. And I don't have a lot of time, but I can talk to you about one example and then we'll go through the others relatively quickly. But this is an example from two cases in Italy. On top, you see Botticelli's Venus. That was used by a French fashion designer, Jean-Paul Gaultier, on some pieces of clothing for a collection a few years ago. And the museum that hosts this painting sued the designer, telling him that he could not use images of Venus on any new clothing. And in a similar way, another museum in Italy sued the puzzle maker Ravensburger, who made a puzzle using this drawing by Leonardo da Vinci on the bottom half, the Vitruvian Man, and Ravensburger had to stop selling those puzzles in Italy. So what we're seeing is that even though these works are clearly in the public domain, they are more than 500 years old, they are still not free to access and reuse in any way we want, because there are other barriers at play, other systems that kind of direct and govern how people can reuse them. And this is where I say I will have to go very, very quickly because of little time, but there are many categories of barriers. Legal barriers are the ones that I've already mentioned. So when institutions will claim a new copyright over digitized heritage that's in the public domain, that creates an artificial barrier because there is no copyright to be claimed, and even though that's illegal, it's still common practice. And as a lay person wanting to use that content, not knowing the intricacies of copyright law will be obviously a hurdle to overcome. And the result is that even though legally it's free to use, in practice, people will find it like a chilling effect of not being able to use it freely. There's also these heritage protection laws that are extending copyright. That's what actually was happening in those two Italian cases, is that Italian courts determined that even though copyright said it was in the public domain, there were cultural heritage protection laws that said that no, if you want to use something of cultural importance that's in a national institution, you need the permission from the institution and you need to pay a fee. So we see this kind of conflict and competition for who is going to determine between the two laws whether something is accessible or not. And in Italy, cultural heritage protection law went above and trumped the copyright permissions. There's many other legal barriers. There's also contractual barriers. So sometimes something is in the public domain, but an institution will write in its terms of use that, yeah, even though this is in the public domain, you cannot use this for commercial purposes, for example. So we'll see that quite often using contract law or terms of use to restrict access. There's also some technological barriers where the items themselves might not be in a format that allows free access. So sometimes there will be a watermark, or you can view but you can't download, etc. So again, something is in the public domain, but technically it's not possible to engage with it as freely as we would want. And then there are structural and ethical barriers, and that's to do sometimes with the high cost of infrastructures, and then institutions ending up charging for access because they need to offset the cost of digitization and providing access. And that economic barrier can also constitute an obstacle for fully engaging with public domain. So what we're actually noticing is that there is a normative gap. There is no law that says, like Article 14, that things in the public domain should stay in the public domain on a global level. And that's what we want to achieve with the Open Heritage Statement. Our ultimate goal is for UNESCO to adopt a recommendation on open heritage on the model of these two existing recommendations. There's one from 2019 on open educational resources. There's one in 2021 on open science. So to complete the trilogy, it would be the next logical step to adopt a recommendation on open heritage. And so that's part of our advocacy, to get UNESCO to understand the barriers and understand the potential of open access to heritage, and enshrine this into an international document. So to that end, we created the Open Heritage Coalition, which was launched in November 2024. And together with all of these organizations that are part of the Open Heritage Coalition, we drafted the Open Heritage Statement. And this statement is basically in a few pages what I've been explaining to you for the past minutes, of course, much more eloquently, but it basically starts with a preamble stating the importance of access to heritage, the various barriers that exist, and what can be done on a policy level to overcome these barriers and enable more equitable access to public domain heritage in the digital environment. So what we're saying is that copyright says it's in the public domain, it should be freely accessible. Look at all of these barriers that exist, let's do something to remove them. So if you scan the QR code, you'll be directed to our website, and you will also find, in addition to the statement, a lot of examples that kind of bring these barriers to life. So I would invite you to look at this in more detail. So for example, we will talk about the interplay between cultural heritage protection laws and copyright and how that can be resolved. Yeah, this is basically what I just said. So the preamble is there to provide some context and articulate the values and the principles and lay out the barriers. Whereas the articles, the actual provisions, propose policy solutions to lower these barriers and unlock the potential of open sharing of heritage. Bon, now the reason that I wanted to focus this on the preamble paragraph S is because I want us to have this conversation about what it means in terms of artificial intelligence. And we drafted this. The first full draft was came. Well, we finished drafting it in March 2025, so about a year ago now. And so many things have changed since, but I think what we felt was that we needed to draft something that was kind of non-committal and broad enough to kind of capture the tensions that we could feel were there, but without preempting any outcomes and without kind of dictating anything because we were not so sure. And I think we did a good job in doing that because it leaves a lot of space for us to explore how these high-level concepts could actually be applied in practice. So that's the kind of only mention of artificial intelligence in the statement, and I'll read it out. We say, we are attentive to the challenges and opportunities brought about by emerging technologies, including artificial intelligence and future technologies, and the need for more ethical and responsible artificial intelligence with respect to access and reuse of public domain heritage. So you'll notice it's really only about public domain heritage because that's the scope of the statement, and we're focusing on ethical and responsible. And so now what we want to do is kind of unpack these two terms and see what that would mean in practice. What do we mean by ethical? What do we mean by responsible? And how can we make sure that the values and the mission of cultural heritage institutions in making public domain heritage available are still upheld and respected when they're being used as training content for artificial intelligence. So I'll end my presentation here because I really want to have a conversation with you about these issues. And maybe before I do that, I want to call you to, if you feel like you're aligned, sign the Open Heritage Statement. We have around 90 signatories at this stage, and what we want to show by having all these institutions and organizations sign is the broad support that exists across the world for and recognition for the need to provide more equitable access to heritage and remove these barriers. So if you feel like this speaks to you and you want to add your voice, I would invite you to go and visit our website. And this is all I wanted to say. For the conversation on CC's work outside of the Open Heritage Statement on AI, I'm also happy to answer your questions. I'll just give a flavor that we are moving away from the signals as they have been presented last year. And what we're really focusing on now is what matters to people when their content is used for AI training. And what we've realized through consultations is what many people care about is attribution. So making sure that when their content is being used for AI training, there is a way to cite or at least go back to the source so people can see the content in its original context. And I think for cultural heritage institutions, that context matters so much. So attribution or some kind of reference to the source is really important. Another important piece here is the compensation or contribution. So how do we make sure that given the huge costs that are implied by making collections openly accessible and the fact that they are being extracted kind of for free without anything coming back to the institutions, how can we address this question of economic fairness? And the last point will be, well, how do we make sure that we kind of maintain this spirit of openness, but in more kind of fair terms, and how do we enforce what we prefer in terms of access conditions? So thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to our conversation.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. I am not sure. Yeah, there's a lot of positive spirit in the call, so that is great. I'm not sure if we have a lot of time for the discussion, but what I can take out of your presentation as an overall is a call for action, for a collaboration between AI4LAM and your organization, probably, to align on how we deal with new technologies, with AI, and access to the content in a responsible way. So that, I guess, would be kind of a baseline to all of us. I can ask if there's any questions. Please raise a hand shortly. You can also ask at the end, of course, or maybe write your question in the chat, so we can maybe then in between, because we have still another presenter, also chat on the subject. So I don't know if there's a quick question now, maybe.
There's one already in the chat.
Okay.
A bit more about how CC sees the future, if it's just about attribution. So yeah, no, it's not just attribution. Attribution is a huge question, but like I said, there's also this kind of economic fairness issue that we want to address by this concept of contribution to the open ecosystem. So it's not necessarily about you use that many works and therefore you should give us a paycheck for that amount. It's more about a spirit of like using the commons and then contributing back to the commons to support this ecosystem. And I think this is also reflected in Wikimedia's approach with access to Wikipedia. So saying, yes, providing free knowledge is not free. And so it's trying to see how we can make sure that there's some kind of contribution and back to the commons in the spirit of reciprocity. And then the other component is, like I said, maintaining kind of the open spirit. So if something is created based on knowledge and content from the commons, there should also be something that is given back to the commons. So models should also be more open and maybe even like making sure that they are open source so that we kind of we maintain this open spirit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
moving away from signals, I think the main shift here is that we first envisioned signals as a label that could sit alongside the licenses as really a preference signal, which was not enforceable. So the licenses, as you know, only operate in the copyright system, and the signals would come as a complement in the data governance system. But what we heard from our community is that having a toothless tool alongside the licenses would not cut it. It would just not be enough to deter unwanted uses. So what we're looking into now is more of a signals with teeth. So adding some contractual obligations for and to enable these to be enforceable, so that we can make sure that if a signal is used alongside a license, that it actually can be enforceable and respected.
Can you talk a little bit hi, I'm Jen Stringer from Getty. Can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about that from either a technical perspective or from
Right now, yeah, we're still at early stages, but I think the idea would be to have a multi-layered license. And I can't really go into the details because a lot of things still need to be laid out and looked into in more detail. But the idea would be that we have a copyright license, as a CC license that we know and love, and there could be a different layer that would address the data governance issues, and so access and use conditions for AI specifically. But I don't think that we're ready yet to go into more details, but I think the main idea of the signal stays the same. It's more about how we can make it enforceable through a technical clause. Sorry, it's not a technical, a contractual clause in the license.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for the questions. If there's not any more, but please, if you have something, please write in the chat. And we would move from the open heritage to open scholarly communication. We have with us the second speaker, Julien Homo. He's data architect, founder of Foxcup, but he's also working on a GRAPHIA project, and he will present us the GRAPHIA knowledge graph project, and I think it's very interesting also for the as a follow-up on this presentation. So Julien, hi, welcome with us. I have to say also two things maybe. The same as I said also for the organization from for the so open Creative Commons Open Heritage Statement. We are also building a cooperation with the Opera's infrastructure for the open scholarly communication, which is also in line what we need for the AI development to grow. We have Ursula, she posted also a link in the chat. So yeah, I would give the floor to Julien, and then at the end we can have also some discussion and some questions still. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines. Hello, everyone. So now I guess you will be able to see my screen. Could you confirm it? Yes, it's okay?
Yeah, it's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, so hello everyone. First of all, thanks a lot for having me in this AI4LAM Community Call today. I'm really happy to be with us. So I am Julien Homo. I am data architect and CEO of Foxcup, which is a French SME based in Paris and specialized in architecting data intelligence. I am also the technical coordinator of GRAPHIA, which will be my main topic for today. And for this session, I will focus on three main aspects of this project. Why we are building a knowledge graph for science, for social sciences and humanities, and why it matters for LAM. Where knowledge graph and AI meet, and then I will also share with you some concrete use cases from this project through archival, heritage, and bibliographic areas. So just before, some word about the project itself. GRAPHIA is a Horizon Europe project, EU-funded, bringing together 20 partners across 10 countries, running from 2025 to 2027. So we are currently at the beginning, more or less, of year 2. Our main goal is to build a comprehensive knowledge graph for the social sciences and humanities and make it usable in practice. So the example I will show later all come from actual GRAPHIA work with concrete scenarios and these partners. So just a quick look at our partner landscape. This is a combination between research infrastructure, universities, SMEs, and cultural heritage institution, and Operas is coordinating. You will see some of them during the use cases I will share with you in a few minutes. But maybe before, about the objective of this project, GRAPHIA delivers 6 things in parallel. The SSH knowledge graph itself, integrating currently disconnected data, open source LLM tailored for SSH. I will come back to this in a few minutes also. We are working on new prototypes and upgrade of existing tools and instruments for this domain. We are also building a framework to automatically extract, index, and enrich citation data from any SSH resource. We are also building a set of API exposing all of these services for third-party reuse. And an important one, we are building a mix of 14 research and industry pilots. Indeed, GRAPHIA is driven by use cases, and we don't build a graph for the sake of the graph. We build it because specific and concrete research questions need it. With the first real part for today, quick note on vocabulary, because knowledge graph is an overloaded term. It can mean a conceptual model, a graph database, an ontology plus RDF, or just a strategy for integration. Google calls its info box a knowledge graph. The data behind Bibliothèque de France, databnf.fr is also a knowledge graph. Siemens has a knowledge graph, but for manufacturing. And they are all right in their own way, but behind they are not the same object. So for today, I use the Hogan and Al 2021 definition. A graph of data meant to represent real-world knowledge, where nodes are entities or concepts, and edges are the relation between them. And what matters for today, once you add semantics, I mean proper identity, proper type relationships, the graph becomes queryable, alienable across sources, and critically, you can ground AI on it. But of course, if anyone wants a deeper walkthrough of knowledge graph fundamentals, definition, architecture, academic knowledge graph landscapes, we try to cover it through our first webinar last June, so feel free to explore this video, scanning this QR code, or you have also some links shared with this presentation. But for today, for me, this slide is one that matters most for this first part, because I don't want to come into this AI4LAM call and pretend knowledge graph are somehow new territory for libraries, archives, or museums. The truth is the opposite, and I want to name it clearly. The LAM community pioneered a knowledge graph with databnf, for example, in 2011. ID.gov started in 2009, or Open Data, for example, with structured cultural heritage metadata since a lot of years. I have a lot of examples in mind, of course. So the honest question, what does GRAPHIA actually bring to this landscape? And for me, I like three things. First, GRAPHIA builds a social sciences and humanities knowledge graph, the Go Triple knowledge graph, and federates around it with existing other knowledge graph like EHRI, Open Citation, ORKG, or JSIS. And here we are not trying to replace anyone's graph with a monolithic one, not at all. We are creating a federation layer for SSH research data. Second, GRAPHIA adopts SKGIF, which is the Scientific Knowledge Graph Interoperability Framework developed within the Research Data Alliance, and contributes to it. It's lightweight, API-based, and lets autonomous knowledge graph federate without changing their internal infrastructure. We are using it across our initial federation with Open Citations, JSIS, and ORKG. And third, about the services, and especially AI services grounded in the graph. Thanks to LLM and AI, we feed the graph with extracted entities. Here, LLMs that let user query the graph in natural language with some techniques to do it. I will explain. All encoded in structured knowledge and not hallucinating on open web document. So to state it clearly, GRAPHIA is a scholarly SSH contribution to the broader knowledge graph landscape, and it sits alongside what you already maintain. So now I would like to share with you more details about the services and AI with a quick look under the hood. At the top, we have this interoperability framework driven by our own ontology, which is the GRAPHIA ontology. This layer makes sure our API, alignment, vocabularies, mapping speak a standard semantic language. At the core, we have our authoritative semantic layer. The facts you can cite, that is RDF for stable semantics, traceable provenance, long-term interoperability. We are building this. First, we are building the Go-Triple Knowledge Graph on Clever, which is a new RDF engine we have selected as our primary backend based on several benchmarks. And next to it, we have also a label property graph on Neo4j, another technology, not as a source of trust here, but as a downstream analytical projection for network science question inefficient in pure RDF. RDF stays the source of trust, but with no write back. On the left, we have our data acquisition platform in order to ingest data, enrich it, extract entities, and publish to the RDF core. And there are we have two layers regarding AI. One for the knowledge graph construction, classifying across the content across 27 SSH disciplines, extracting entities from full text with person, places, event concept, parsing bibliographic reference to feed a SSH citation index. And we also enrich the record with keyword and abstract. We have also another AI layer for the knowledge graph exploration. You can ask a question in plain natural language, English, French, Italian, whatever, and the tool translates it into a Sparkle query and runs it across our federated knowledge graph and returns an answer good in the fact. Of course, this is something very new, very innovative regarding the complexity of AI and also the challenge behind. So we have a lot of questions and we are working together to solve it. But the benefit is crucial for cultural content. Less hallucination with traceable resources. Here, the LLM does not invent facts. Every answer is backed by evidence you can inspect thanks to traceable and accountable AI on culture and content through the graph, the knowledge graph, and the federation. So now I would like to share with you some real concrete examples, some concrete use cases. But just before, a quick methodological note before diving in. We have currently 49 map use cases in GRAPHIA. We have 14 pilots, but also 39 identified use cases. And all of them fall into this 5 recurring...
What do these have in common with humans?
Sorry? Okay, maybe a mistake. So all these use cases fall into 5 recurring patterns. The use cases regarding connect and integrate, where heterogeneous sources brought together. Then we have the pattern about enrich and make explicit. Here we need to extract missing entities, links, and metadata. Another pattern for these use cases is about explore and answer questions. I mean, navigating connection to test some hypotheses and assumption. We have also a type of use case which is about trust, provenance, and quality in order to make reuse auditable. Sorry. And the last one is about analyze the network thanks to graph algorithm to detect some statistical pattern and other shapes through the graph. So we have different stories, but same methods here. For each pattern, we write the competency question that make the requirement testable. But let me share a quick word on that. In GRAPHIA, every use case is anchored by its competency question. This is our central methodological tool. The idea behind is very, very simple. A use case is a story with an actor, a goal, an outcome. But build me an history graph is not actionable. So we add a layer, which is a knowledge graph use case at the question the graph must answer. So a competency question, has three parts: the input, what do we start from, the path, what relationships to follow, and the output, what comes back. For example, given an author, found who influenced him and who he corresponded with, and then return a network map. And here the validation rule is, if the graph can answer the competency question, the design is valid. If not, you immediately know what is missing. So the use case is the story, the competency question is the blueprint, and the graph is the answer. And let me share now with you the 5 examples to illustrate the previous concept I have introduced very quickly. My first example is about Genius Loci, one of our industry partners based in Pisa. They are a location data company combining traditional analytics with geographical AI. Their goal, produce geosocial indicators, for example, territorial attractiveness or social cultural context, by combining SSH evidence across spatial levels. I mean neighborhood, municipality, or province. The problem, these indicators are hard to justify and compare because the underlying evidence is scattered and described with inconsistent concepts, place names, time frames, and naming variants. So here, the knowledge graph twist is to treat territories as first-class entities connected to evidence via typed links and stable identifier. An indicator is no longer a raw score. It becomes something you can compute, explain, and query. So here, the project brings 3 things: a shared concept layer to normalize concept, place an entity linked in, an evidence graph where every score is traceable, and some reusable APIs for indicator plus their justification. And the competency question are, given a municipality, what SSH evidence is connected to it about concept X in period T, or which signals support or contradict the indicator value, which places are comparable because they share similar evidence patterns. A second example is about EHRE, the European Holocaust Research Infrastructure. EHRE aggregates Holocaust archival materials still very dispersed across Europe. Their aim, let researchers explore it as one connected space, people, places, events, institutions, or for example, collection. But for them, the problem is extreme fragmentation. The same person appears under different names across institutions and countries. Locations are spelled differently, renamed after the war, reorganized administratively. Meanings are only implicit in the description. So cross-collection research is slow and error-prone. That's why the knowledge graph twist here is makes entities and relationship explicit. Who, where, when, and what, and how records actually connect. Researchers traverse and validate across archives instead of reading each collection in isolation. So here, GRAPHIA provides an entity layer which identifier for reconciliation across collection. Proper semantic disambiguation, not only string matching. And we also use type links with provenance, cross-collection multi-op querying in order to jump through the graph, and auditable link suggestion. And the competency question could be given a person, which records across institutions refer to them, on how are they linked through places and events, which testimonies, for example, mention a location within a time window. It these are the competency questions we are using for this one. My third example is about GESIS, which is the Generation and Gender Program. This is with their program, I mean. The context is researchers publish papers based on specific survey dataset and often on specific variables. But this usage is rarely captured in structured metadata. Mentions live in the full text of paper with inconsistent naming and incomplete citation. So the simple question is, where was this dataset used, or where was this variable used? And this question is extremely hard to answer at scale. That's why we are using NLP to detect dataset and variable mentioned in publication, and we are trying to publish them as searchable evidence-based links between publication, dataset, and variable. And then GRAPHIA brings this shared context and interoperability layer. So these enriched links are expressed consistently, aligned to identifiers, reusable beyond one platform. So the question to solve it is, given a dataset, which publication used it and which variables? Given a variable, which publication mentioned it and with what supporting snippet? And my two last examples for today. This one is about Diamond Open Access Literary Snapshot. So regarding cross-knowledge graph discovery, our researcher, an SSH researcher, investigate Diamond OI phonetics models because he needs to build a relevant literature corpus, not just one or two papers, but a usable set, and fast. But the problem is relevant papers are spread across multiple scholarly knowledge graph, Open Citation, ORKG, GoTriple. So they have also inconsistent keyword, the same work under different identifiers, different metadata shapes. That's why here we run a cross-source metadata search across title, abstract, keyword, then merge semantically aligned, deduplicate via identifier through the federation. And GRAPHIA brings this federated engine, I mean federated retrieval across this knowledge graph with some concept-aware expansion and identifier alignment, and also with some deduplication part. So here, which paper match my keyword across sources is our competency question to solve this concrete example. We have also some other question. And very quickly, the last one, tracing school of thought. It's an important one for us because it's about network analysis. When a researcher working on a topic doesn't just want a list of paper. Sometimes they want to understand how the research landscape is structured, about authors, institution, venues, or concept. I mean the shape of the field. But standard keyword search is flat. It returns document, but not the communities, not bridges between groups, and not the most influential nodes beyond raw citation counts, for example. That's why we try to provide a relevant subgraph from this SSH knowledge graph, generate an label property graph analytics view, and run graph analytics on top of it, with some graph data science libraries to compute these communities, this centrality, this similarity, to extract some embeddings from this. So here, this is the part provided by GRAPHIA, this analytic layer, in order to answer this competency question. For topic X, what are the main communities or author or constitution involved? Which author or institution bridge two communities, etc. So that's all for me today. I tried to share with you many things regarding this project, but of course, each component involved could be a full session. So feel free to ask any question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julien. I think it's really a good, again, call for action and collaboration. So I would open the floor to any questions that might. We still have a few minutes, so. So, Julien, maybe I would have a question. It's more of an operative on an operative level. As I see what you are also doing in the GRAPHIA project is, of course, I see the relation between different working groups that we have and your work. Where do you see this intersection between your project and our partners in the AI4LAM organization? And then we also have Sophia.
Yes, I think we could have different synergies. I have already mentioned some services you could reuse as a user, but of course, in terms of communities, definitively, I guess as you have a lot of knowledge. You could be also interested to know more about the federation we are building, because it's something very new. We need a lot of help, including from you, to build something really robust, stable. It could be a synergy I have in mind to share with you all this aspect also. And of course, all the experience regarding the result with AI we are using. We have a lot of things to share with you, because we are trying to build this project, but of course, with some result experience to learn together regarding these new services. And also because AI is moving so fast. So different aspects, and I could develop more, but for me, federation, AI services, and use cases could be the most relevant synergies we could have together.
Yeah, so maybe also there are two possible ways how to develop this further. One would be, of course, to integrate the knowledge that you can share, also in our working group on teaching and learning, where we develop the programs for further knowledge sharing between in our community. And the second, of course, would be to establish a new working group together with all the member organizations that would be interested to cooperate, maybe. So. But that I'm not too long, and I know we will need to finish our call. We still have Sophia with a question. So please, Sophia.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentation. I'm Sofia Baroncini from the DH Lab from the Leibniz Institute of European History. And the project is amazing, and I was so it would be great if all of this could be worked out. So as it's a lot, I was mainly wondering what is at which stage is it? What is it that you already achieved, and what you see as the main challenges? I'm thinking. Especially to the humanities domain, where the open access publications are really few, and mainly publications that are relevant for the community are in printed format. So maybe it's possible to find them online with OCR, but maybe there are also right issues. So yeah, I wanted to hear more about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sofia, for your question. Okay, yes, definitely, we have a lot of challenges through this project, but we have already some stable foundation regarding the infrastructure, the knowledge graph itself, and also regarding the design and the strategy. We worked a lot together to identify the best framework to follow in order to federate the other knowledge graph, and obviously to not reinvent the wheel. And now we are working on the first prototype regarding this federation aspect, but we have already some good and positive results from the AI services we are building. I mean, for the translation from natural language query to Sparkle query, we have already a first prototype. We have also we made also some progresses regarding the SSH citation index with a lot of benchmark. We are also using a new RDF engine, which is clever, with very interesting result in terms of scalability. That's why we need 1 year more to be able to share something very stable in terms of federation, but we will be able to. Today we are confident to share something concrete and reusable later, even if the AI aspect will be to we will have to improve this aspect regarding the quality of some translation. The first result and the foundation are encouraging for the next step. So yeah, we still need more time, but we will release the first version of this knowledge graph this summer, and then last year, the most important AI services and the federation side.
Okay. Thank you very much also to all the participants. To conclude this call, I would like to emphasize that it's very important that we collaborate with the different networks and different partners together, what we already saw today. The next steps are, of course, the next community call, which is already, we're already planning it, and you already saw some notifications already in the chat. And I would also like to draw your attention to the initial fee announcement we just published on our webpage for the Fantastic Futures 2026 event in Washington, D.C. So we have now the board of directors of AI4LAM just confirmed the participation fees for the Fantastic Futures. You can see that on our webpage, and you can also, of course, sign for our newsletter so that you also always stay informed of our next endeavors. Yeah, well, that would be for now. But of course, the call for the collaboration stays, and we will try to develop this further with the operas and the GRAPHIA project, as well as sorry, I have completely lost my thread now because I have too much things open. So with the open heritage and with the statement that was also signed by Europeana, as Brigitte also mentioned in the chat. So thank you very much for today, and well, we see each other next in a month that is coming. Thank you.